Doyle, and I'm here really to talk about two sectors that we don't always talk about for those of us who are in the senior living industry, and that is housing, senior housing, where we live, which Ryan's going to talk about, and higher education, and how we can put those two sectors together to really yield results, not only for our bottom line, but also for how we live and how we engage with the world. So I've been thinking about this for a very long time. In my 20s, I did a Fulbright in Sweden looking at different ways that older adults live and engage with healthcare in their communities. And that has been in the back of my mind literally my entire career, rolling out the PACE program in Massachusetts, working in the payer side, a little bit of age tech, and then for the last 8 years, leading LaSalle Village on the campus of LaSalle University in Newton, Massachusetts. And that's the only community of its kind where it's fully integrated into the university, and it is a true intergenerational campus. What I'd like to talk about is how we take our organizations and begin to think differently about how we frame what we do and how we move maybe from where we are. Maybe we're already along the line where we have a university partner or we've been thinking about it, and how we change the culture and evolve our culture to really meet the needs of everyone across the lifespan. So I always love chocolate, so anything about chocolate. I think about this as like Reese's peanut butter cup. You take chocolate and you take peanut butter, and together it's so much better. And our opportunity is to think about the synergies in our sectors. So of course it is the US favorite Halloween candy, so we can really create something new like that too, that shakes up the whole sector and create something not for everybody, because that's the beauty of what we do. We need options for a whole span of people who want all sorts of different things. But I haven't met anybody who doesn't like to learn, and I think that's what we're tapping into. So why intergenerational living and learning now? We all know, because we heard it from every speaker, we all know what our industry is doing. We have many more older adults. But let's think about the younger cohort. And it really does boil down to an amazing synergy right now between the demographics of the younger sector and the older sector. You know, in just about 11 years, the number of people who are over 65 will be greater than the number of people under 18. And that's the first time that's happened. So think about it if you all worked in higher ed, and I know some of you have worked in higher ed, Marcus, and you were looking at your client base and you're thinking, it's like going straight down. What am I going to do? We see it, and I step over here into senior housing and I think, opportunity for our industry. So a little bit about the data. This is the birth rate. Now, Kim Lear talked about this yesterday. The birth rate has been declining, and in 27 to 29 during the Great Recession, a lot of people didn't have babies, and frankly, that cohort is now reaching the traditional college age, 17, 18, and they're just a smaller pool. So when I talk to university and college presidents, which I do very frequently, within minutes of the conversation, they talk about the enrollment cliff, because they're facing this much smaller cohort and saying, shoot, I have huge fixed costs, I have faculty, I have infrastructure, I have a marketing department, etc., and I have fewer clients. And we all know, and for those of you who have college-age children or kids who are coming up, they're also thinking like, hey, the job market looks kind of good and I could earn $20 an hour doing this or that. Or, you know what, there's not value for that education. I don't really want to spend that money. I can go online and get it more cheaply. So the disruption in the higher ed market is so intense right now. And hey, we're here to take advantage of it, is what I'd like to say. Now, I started Spark Living and Learning, and I left LaSalle Village, where I was president for 8 years, because I saw the incredible impact, not only on the bottom line, but also on the relationships and intergenerational lifelong learning benefits for the people. Because we're in the people business. That's what we're all about. Coming out of COVID, so COVID obviously put a damper on our segment in a big way, same for higher ed. But when LaSalle Village came out of COVID, our balance sheet was stronger, full occupancy, waitlist increased 4 times because we kept the education going, we flipped to online, we sourced faculty literally from around the globe, actually including Jack York's friend Francis, if any of you have met Jack, in Cameroon. So you can do huge things with education. We didn't miss a beat. We engaged 60 residents in teaching, and that kind of culture was what really changed the whole bottom line. Actually, it was quite good before, but it was much better, and that's music to our ears as business people, but also we're going to talk a little bit about what it means from a living perspective. Okay, so let's shake it up a little bit here. We are all really good at delivering housing and healthcare and hospitality, and now I want to add higher ed to the mix. So when I look at the future outlook, we always have to think about it from a business perspective. How are we going to generate occupancy, new revenue opportunities, and from the value proposition for the higher educational institute, they're looking at how do I augment my customer base? How do I develop new revenue lines from perhaps leveraging my infrastructure and some of the services I provide? So it's really, the future outlook is it's good for the bottom line for both sectors. I haven't used the word workforce yet, but we've certainly talked about that from this stage, and we've heard about it the entire time during this conference. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is fantastic, not only for your residents, but for your staff. So being and creating a learning environment where you support people in achieving their undergrad, grad degrees, certificates, is really the kind of environment people want to be living and working in. Now, many of you know Charles from CARE, and he had this phenomenal survey where he asked, over 10,000 people, gave them a list of something like 20 different benefit opportunities and said, what's most important to you? Pick your top 3. The top 1, and he was explaining to me that for the most part, these were frontline caregivers, certified nursing assistants. The top 1 was tuition reimbursement in my field. So think about that aligning with a university or college that has a clinical programs. And number 2 was tuition reimbursement in any field. So from a recruitment perspective, thumbs up, and from a retention perspective, thumbs up. Because it takes a while to get those degrees, and then the loyalty is just incredible. We know that some of the data on improving health outcomes for mental health as well as physical health, for reducing social isolation, and for being in a vibrant community. Actually, the McKinsey report is fantastic if you haven't seen that. Does talk about some of the Rush Medical Center data on reduction in cognitive decline and even risk for stroke. And guess what? We could change some of those ageist stereotypes that are all around us. So I had those 4 quadrants, and I'm going to zip through them pretty fast. But one I want to talk about is design. So some of you are thinking about, what is she talking about? Is it building, or is it maybe taking an existing property? It could be both. So you may have an existing property, perhaps it's near a university or college, and you're thinking about how to create really integrated programming. But you also want to think about how your property is going to be conducive to that. So building some learning spaces in your own community, learning spaces in the university, how are you going to leverage the fitness center, maybe the library, et cetera. So you're really going to think holistically about that campus. Actually, Peter Kress and I were chatting, and we like the term holistic community. You know, it's really one, I think, that captures what we're trying to do here. If you're building from scratch, you have an opportunity to do what we heard this morning in the ESG presentation around thinking about how you design the property, how you make it not only work for the humans who are living there, but for the environment. So there's just huge opportunities there. Okay, hospitality. I like to think about hospitality as a way that is just kind of embracing that it's an active word, not one where you're receiving kind of the hospitality. So kind of wildly welcoming. And on a university campus with diversity and constantly changing ideas, that kind of term becomes one that's always evolving because students have a lot of different interests, and the residents, some of these residents right here, jazz musician, they're teaching students, the students are teaching the residents, learning, there's a textile artist. I mean, there's a lot that can go on in hospitality that is by residents for residents, by students for residents, by residents for students, all directions. And then healthcare. A little story. I sit on the board of one of the Mass General Brigham advisory, it's an advisory board, and the hospital that's down the road from where I was the president of LaSalle said to me that all the residents, that they always were impatient to get back to their classes, whereas most older people could be sitting in the waiting room, they don't really have much to do, it's okay. These residents were like, come on, I have a place to go, I cannot be late for class. And I think that's the kind of environment where we want healthcare to be supporting living a full life. We do not want it to be the full life, setting the appointments, going to the appointments, which often is the case, actually. Even if those of us who have to get healthcare, it just takes a lot of time. So how we design that with partnerships, creating that, that continuum. And then the magic is really the education. Because on a college campus, we all know that a lot of the learning happens outside the classroom. And I see that with different age cohorts. You have people who are volunteering together, say on the daycare on campus, young and old. You have, I've seen a panel discussion of immigrants with a 90-year-old who was an immigrant in her teens and a young woman who's an immigrant in her teens, and what they shared across those generations, what was new, what was the same. So really cool stuff can happen. And I think when you're designing the programs, it has to be very intentional. It is not just like, hey, you can audit a class and you can sit in the back. No, that is not integrated education. So it's really about whether a resident's and an undergrad are taking a class or doing a project, it's all together. There's one great story about somebody asked me, what kind of classes do people take? Well, everything from evolution to literature. But one of my favorites is a friend of mine, Larry, who was a commissioner of the state prison system in a state. And when he came in, he said, I want to take classes in stuff I've never done before. I need to branch out. And the first class he took with undergrads was a fashion class. And I thought that was really a great example because it was totally outside his realm. And I think that's what some of the fun is. Okay, so what I'm doing now is really working with senior living companies and with universities to develop a campus framework, an assessment of how to align goals and create synergies. And these are really 4 components that are must-haves to creating a really integrated environment where your residents, who are going to speak up, because we know from yesterday's conversation on generations, this next generation is going to let you know how they feel. These elements of culture are absolutely critical. People, philosophy, purpose, and then the partnership. So I'm going to zip through these because I want to talk about the partnership. So the benefits, the bottom line benefits, when you focus on people, are of course improved recruitment and retention and professional growth. But also in the front row here is actually a resident who was the chair of the board, who was elected by the board. So you can really, that governance that Lynn Katzman talked about this morning, you can really get among your residents. And it is tricky, but it actually creates alignment as well. When you look at a philosophy, when you put yourself out there in the world as a company, and you say we have a philosophy of learning, and it's in everything across your environment, you are creating, your residents will come up with ideas that you don't, and your students, that you have never thought of. So this picture is my friend Sushi Gawandi, and a resident student who is our lifeguard and package deliverer and everything else. and they wanted to play ping pong during COVID, and so of course, put it outside, and there were like 50-something people, students and residents, who played constantly. I think we ran through like 4 ping pong tables because of the elements. Purpose. This is actually really the key word for all of us. When you have people, this is a class, actually these were both faculty, people who are faculty, and by the way, this program does not have to be for people who have means or who already have PhDs or professional degrees. Learning is an equalizer. So whether you're thinking about properties for middle income or higher income, we can have partnerships that can adapt to our communities. And I think that's really critical. That we heard from Stephanie this morning, being flexible and adaptable is really key. And listening, because we know that, think about all the things you like to do outside of work. It's the same for our residents and same for the students. How do we tap into that sense of purpose in a meaningful way? And you don't have to create it if you're on a college campus. You have the library, you have a fitness center, you have an endless list of lectures at the university, you have panels, you have parties. I mean, it's kind of amazing. You also have opportunity for innovation. So this is just one low-tech example, but a resident worked with a faculty member and students to design these high visibility cards for duplicate bridge. Another example were graduate students at MIT Media Lab working with residents to co-design personal robots. And what the grad students, and it was a class, and it actually went on for a class that went on for years because they became part of the testing group, this cohort of residents. And the grad students learned, the residents wanted to, some of them wanted to program the robot. They wanted to learn how to program. They'd never programmed. But they didn't want to be given something that didn't have an ability for them to interact. So the endless opportunities for co-design of products that your organization can be a part of. And we also heard from Brian this morning, the kind of buzz that happens when you are out there working with new companies and thinking about new products. And residents and students together are pretty amazing in that way. All right, what's the benefit, bottom line? Well, from a business perspective, you have infrastructure, university has infrastructure. It is entirely possible and beneficial for you to sell services to each other. So for example, when I was the president of LaSalle, I purchased all of these services from the university. Campus police, IT, facilities, and actually I used a huge number of other services that I didn't pay for. Marketing, HR, where there were just other people and resources to use. So when you think about the cost of incurring those yourself, transportation, dining, huge opportunities. Likewise, the university may say, hey, you've got awesome dining, and we need to be out of the business of that. Have you thought about helping us? Can go both ways. I'm going to skip that one. Ultimately, the intergenerational living and learning campus can happen in a lot of different ways. So the clients I'm working with now, some are in a turnaround situation where they're looking at properties where they need to think differently, reframe, we've heard that word a lot, what's being offered. Others are actually in the planning stages now, while the interest rate world is a little wonky, in the planning stages for actually building new properties down the line, leasing or buying land on university campuses. So these campuses, some campuses have excess land that's not monetized, that they'd like to monetize. Others are in an urban environment and they don't have the land, so you have to get more creative. But it's really imagining something different, and each partnership is going to look a little bit different, but have some core elements. So to wrap, the synergies that we're really looking at when I approach a campus assessment, a senior living partnership with a university assessment, really is looking first at what are your goals? Everybody wants to make sure their bottom line works. We need occupancy, we need workforce. The university needs a larger pool of students, and they also need new revenue streams. You ask, what are the facilities and property opportunities? Workforce, we discussed. The positive benefits each want for their customer base, and physical and mental health, the learning opportunities, the attainability and pricing. How might this change? It does not have to mean that your prices go up, because you're going to leverage some of those. You're going to operationally do better on some of your expenses. And the university is not selling you education at $70,000 a year. In fact, it's really the marginal cost for that education for them is very low. They're going to benefit from all the other components, the business shared services and the new sort of culture. So at the end of the day, we just have a lot of opportunity as an industry. I did not leave any time for questions. So if you have questions, I'm around at the break and at lunch, and I would really be happy to speak with anyone in the audience. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne.